Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. This is your host, Ryan Coyle, back with our weekly show, the Fantasy Football Stardom Situm Show. And we're hot here at Beef Up Front so far to start the year. This has probably been our best show on the channel to start off the football season. After a great week one where our start list outscored our sit list 130 to 69, last week we came back and did even better, 190 total points on the start list and only 87 on the sit list. So I think I've been giving out some good picks so far. So if you've been taking these for like your daily fantasy, or even if they're on your season long team and kind of been listening to this advice, I think you've been making out pretty well in regards to what I've been telling you to do for your fantasy team. So let's stay hot. Let's keep it cooking here at Beef Up Front for the weekly fantasy football show. For those of you, if this is your first time tuning into the show, I'm not giving you Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen on the start list. I'm not giving you Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor. I'm giving you guys who are ranked maybe outside the top 10, guys that you might be able to get cheaper on that daily fantasy, maybe guys that are on your bench that I think could have a good week that week, a nice opportunity ahead of them. And then I'm not giving you obvious sits like the fourth receiver on the Browns or the second tight end on the Jaguars, guys like that. I'm looking to give you guys who you might be starting on most weeks, and then you're forced to kind of take them out of the lineup due to a bad matchup or some concerns from me, from what I've seen from them, or just looking at some numbers and me not liking them in the lineup that week. So we'll go over week 2 just to give you a little indication of kind of what those lineups looked like. As I said, 190 total points, and that was after week 1 where we had 130 total points. I thought that was good. This was 190. I had Jalen Hurts versus the Vikings. He might now be like ineligible to be on this start list. He might be a guy that you have to start every week just because of how good he's looked in fantasy through 2 weeks. But I had him versus the Vikings. He finished as the third best quarterback last week with 34 points. I had Kirk Cousins. He had a poor game, 25th. He had 11 points. Then we had Nick Chubb. He was the first running back in fantasy last week. This is all PPR scoring, 32 points. Then you had Antonio Gibson, finished 16th, so pretty solid there with 12 points. Amon-Ra St. Brown had an awesome week. I think most weeks this would be like a number 1 or number 2 fantasy week, but we had some pretty crazy receiver weeks from Waddle, Tyreek, and I can't think of the other guy off the top of my head who had a great week. Oh, Stephon Diggs last night. But Amon-Ra St. Brown finished 4th with 39 points, and we had Mike Williams. He was our guy on Thursday night. He started off the week really strong, finishing 8th with 25 points. Gerald Everett finished 8th at the tight end spot with 13 points. Zach Ertz finished 3rd with 15 points. And then we had the Packers defense finish 8th with 9 points. So that added up to a total of 190 points. And then on our sit list, we had Tom Brady. He finished 28th last week with only getting 9 points. Carson Wentz, he had another good week. I didn't think he would have nice back-to-back weeks. He finished 5th, 28 points, so a miss there. Cam Akers, a good hit here, only had 8 points total, 32nd overall among running backs. Ezekiel Elliott, only 5 points total, 46 amongst running backs. CD Lamb had 15 points, 24th, so that was a so-so pick. It could have gone either way, I think, with that one. Tyler Lockett, I think this was a bit of a miss, had 19 points, finishing 15th. But then we had Cole Kmet, Bears tight end against the Packers. He had 0 points last week, so he wasn't even registered. No catches. And then Robert Tonyan, I had him in there as well. 33rd ranked tight end last week with only 3 points. And then we had Colts Diaz said to bench them last week, and they finished 29th, getting a total of 0 points last week. So the start list outscored the sit list by 103 last week. So if that's no indication of kind of how we've been rocking so far this season on Beef Up Front with our fantasy football coverage, hopefully you're believers after this week with week 3. So we'll get into this week's list. We go through the whole start list first, and then the sit list next. We go 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 2 tight ends, and a defense. If you like to stream defenses and stuff. If you like kickers, I haven't included them yet. If you like kickers and have any questions, just ask us a comment in the question below, or reach out to us on any of our social media pages. And then our sit list, we have the same exact thing. So we'll go with the start list. Quarterbacks to begin, as always. I'm going to have faith in Kirk Cousins this week against Detroit. He's got a 1 o'clock game. They've allowed back-to-back top 5 fantasy quarterback performances to Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts throughout their first 2 games. Kirk Cousins is no longer playing on a Monday night in a primetime game. You get him at 1 o'clock where he's substantially better throughout his NFL career. I think he has a nice bounce back week this week against a team that's allowed back-to-back top 5 fantasy quarterback performances. Next guy on our list, we're going to go Joe Burrow at the Jets. I think the breakout game for this Bengals offense is coming. They haven't looked very good throughout the first 2 weeks. Have really struggled. Burrow's been turning the ball over a little bit. Don't really have any statistical evidence to back this one up. I just don't see the Bengals, after going to the Super Bowl last year, I thought they would take a step back this year, but I don't see them starting out 0-3, losing to the Jets. And usually when we saw the Bengals win last year, it was on the back of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I think those two kind of get cooking in this one. The Jets don't really have the pieces in the secondary, in my eyes, to match up with the Bengals. So I like Joe Burrow this week as a very good stardom candidate. We go to the running backs now. We got Miles Sanders, Eagles running back at Washington. Eagles have been feeding him the ball. I think he had 14 carries week 1. He had 17 carries last night against the Vikings. DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams both had solid performances on the ground last week against Washington. James Robinson and ETN were productive in week 1 too. This is kind of a hard week, I think, for running backs. We got some tough matchups like A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones against the Bucs defense. You had Leonard Fournette against the Packers. There's a bunch of guys who are some of the higher ranked fantasy running backs who have tough matchups this week. So I think Miles Sanders, you could get him at a pretty good value play. And if he continues to get the production on the ground, and he's been also catching the ball a little bit as well, I think he could line up to have a pretty nice fantasy season. I was a guy I was a little bit down on coming into the year just based on his role from last year. It looks like the Eagles are making a point of emphasis to get him the football. Next running back, we're going to go Cordell Patterson at Seattle. This is another one with kind of like Burrow, a bit of a gut feeling for me here. I think the Falcons win this game. I think Patterson has some big plays. We saw in week 1 that he still can have some really big production when he ran for 120 yards. Last week, he only carried the ball 10 times for 41 yards, but he's playing a Seattle defense that I think lacks talent. Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, if there weren't for a few fumbles there on the goal line, they probably would have had some rushing touchdowns on week 1. I don't think this Seattle team very good. Jeff Wilson had a nice week versus them last week on the ground. I think Patterson could be in for a pretty solid day here. We move to the receivers now. I got 2 rookie receivers on this list. So if you're a daily fantasy streamer, or maybe you were able to get these guys on your waiver wire, I think that they could be in for some pretty big receiving seasons going forward. But if you're on the daily streaming and with the salary and whatnot, you still might be able to get these guys at pretty good value. First one is going to be Jets wide receiver Garrett Wilson versus Cincinnati. He looked pretty legit early in his career. Some of the guys that played against him or have practiced against him were kind of comparing him to Justin Jefferson. Now he's got that long, like lanky frame, but really big, really long, big strides, and he's been a productive receiver so far through 2 weeks. Look for him to build off last week's 100-plus yard performance, 2 touchdown performance, kind of be the guy for Joe Flacco until Zach Wilson's back. Playing a Bengals secondary that doesn't really have the greatest cornerback play. I think as I touched on earlier with the Bengals, I think that they're going to have a nice performance this one. I think the Jets are going to be trailing, so they're going to be throwing from behind a lot, the Jets in this one. So he's got a good chance to get some garbage time points as well. So look for Garrett Wilson to have a nice week. Second receiver, rookie guy, as I touched on, we're going to go with Drake London, Falcons receiver at Seattle. He's been the main weapon in the passing game so far. Kyle Pitts has been a bit of an afterthought. He's getting talked about, I think, in the media a little bit too much this week, Kyle Pitts. So I think we're going to see an emphasis on getting him the football more. But London's been the main weapon for them so far there. Went for 8 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown last week after 5 catches for 75 yards in week 1. I think I saw he's got like 33% of the target share for that Falcons offense. Seattle's got some young and inexperienced corners. Drake London could have a really big day. I think that the Falcons go into Seattle and find a way to win too. Tight end spot, we're going to go with a guy that I talked about coming into the season as a bit of a sleeper, and he's proven me right so far. That's Gerald Everett of the Chargers versus the Jags. Been real productive so far. He's been kind of the second option in that passing game since Keenan Allen went out. If I had to guess, Keenan Allen won't play. He's kind of known for his soft tissue injuries over the course of his career. I don't think they want to rush him back in what is looking to be a long season for the Chargers team, most likely. Who knows the status of Justin Herbert as well with that rib injury? I think he'll play, but he could be limited if he does. And if he doesn't play, if they decide to keep him out, if they think that they can beat the Jaguars with Chase Daniel at the helm, I think that would be even better for Gerald Everett because if Chase Daniels plays, he's going to be check down Charlie style. So that would lead to a lot of plays for Gerald Everett, in my opinion, for this week. And then our last tight end on the list, we got tight end Pat Freiermuth against the Browns of the Steelers. Trubisky, he's looking to play conservative. He doesn't want to lose his job by turning the football over. Check down. Freiermuth had 75 yards week 1. He scored a touchdown last week, had 4 catches as well. He's been Mitch Trubisky's kind of safety blanket so far. I think that the Steelers are going to beat the Browns on Thursday Night Football this week, and I think Freiermuth has another touchdown coming his way. And then our defense we're looking to start this week, we got the Ravens at the Patriots. This Patriots offense has only put up 24 points so far in the season. The Ravens had a bit of a collapse last week, but that was against two of the fastest, if not the fastest receivers in the NFL. The Patriots don't have anyone like Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle to scare the Ravens defense. I think they get back on track this week and have a good week. Like I said, I'm not going to list a kicker here, but if you have any kicker questions, like you're streaming a guy on fantasy, or if you just are looking to pick one up for this week, don't be afraid to drop a comment in the section below. And then when we look at the sit list for this week, or I'll run through the start list again from the top. So we got Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, Miles Sanders, Cordell Patterson, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Gerald Everett, Pat Freiermuth, and Ravens defense. And then guys we're looking to sit. We're going to start it off with Aaron Rodgers, probably one of the few times he'll be on this list this year as they play Tampa Bay. They've been running the football a lot, a heavy emphasis on getting Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon the ball, especially last week against the Bears. Bucs are only allowing 6.5 points per game. This Bucs defense is loaded on all 3 levels. I don't think this Packers passing attack is really up to speed yet. So until it is, I don't really recommend playing Aaron Rodgers, as it looks like they're going to be a run heavy team. But still, he could go off any week. But this week is definitely a tough matchup for him. I'd keep him on your bench. Second quarterback is going to be Russell Wilson versus the 49ers. He's really struggled out of the gate. The Broncos haven't looked very good, only had 16 points in week 1. I think they had 20 points last week. They really struggled last week, though, against a Texans team that isn't very good as well. I think they're going to get going, but he's on one of my fantasy teams. I'm looking to keep him on the bench this week. Just has really struggled, hasn't had really good timing. Jerry Jeudy might be out as well, and he gets a matchup against a tough 49ers defense. Go to the running backs now. We're going to go Travis Etienne at the Chargers. A bit of a disappointment so far. James Robinson appears to be the lead dog. Maybe look at Etienne as a flex option. I think the Chargers, if Herbert plays, are going to win this one by like about 10. So if the Jags are coming from behind, Etienne's going to be in the game as that pass catching back. He's going to get some catches, but no more than a flex option this week. I think you could probably do better at the running back spot if you're looking to stream guys. James Robinson looks like he's the lead kind of back when it comes to just getting the carries in that offense. So I'm keeping Etienne on my bench this week. Next running back, we're going to go with back-to-back weeks here for this guy, Ezekiel Elliott at the Giants. He looked shot to me. He looked shot to me last year. He was on my do not draft list. I have him on one of my teams. I just had to get a guy just for some value, just because I think he's going to get some touches and kind of hope he remain productive. But Pollard, I think more touches for him are coming. He looks a lot more just explosive and just better with the ball in his hands at this point in his career. I think they're going to continue to face a pretty stacked box with Cooper Rush. And despite him playing pretty well, still not a very dangerous passing game right now with him in the offense. So I think that we're going to see another stacked box for the Cowboys this week against the Giants. And he's only ran for 52 and 53 yards in their 2 games respectively this season. So not liking the plays Zeke this week. Wide receiver, we're going to go Terry McLaurin versus the Eagles. Darius Slay shut down Justin Jefferson for the most part, contained him. I think 5 catches for 48 yards. That's great against Jefferson, who routinely puts up 100 and at least a touchdown. I expect the Eagles to kind of model that similar defensive approach they had last week against Minnesota on Monday night, against Washington this week. Expect Terry McLaurin to be matched up against Slay for most of the game. If not, he's still got James Bradbury on the other side. That's a really strong corner, though. And even in the slot, if he goes in there with Avonte Maddox, there's better options this week out there than Terry McLaurin, in my opinion. Wide receiver number 2, we're going to go with Rashad Bateman at New England. He's had a pretty nice start to the year, pretty impressive with 2 touchdowns in his first 2 weeks. Pats have only allowed 34 points though through 2 games this year. Bill has had good game plans for Lamar in their few matchups as a coach. The secondary in New England is still strong despite their porous offense and limited weapons on that side of the ball. This defense is still going to be really strong, in my opinion. So I think Rashad Bateman this week, there's definitely some better guys out there that you can have, especially in the streaming world. He's a guy that I'm looking to not really invest in this week. Tight end spot, we're going to go with Dawson Knox of the Bills at Miami. He hasn't seen many balls thrown his way this year. Only has 5 catches for 46 yards on the season. I'm just not trusting him so far in fantasy. He had that big extension before the year, so I expect him to see an increased role as the season goes along, but it looks like Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen are cooking too much right now. So Knox hasn't really benefited much yet. So look to keep him on your bench this week. And then another guy, you might say, all right, why is he on your list again? But Cole Kmet versus Houston. Most leagues, if you're in like a 12-team league, he was probably the 10th in between 10th and 12th tight end pick. So most people probably drafted him like as a starter. I don't know if you want to cut him yet, or if you had a backup. Maybe you went out and made a trade. Maybe you picked some guy up. He still might be on your roster. I like him going forward still long term. I think he's a pretty solid player, but looks like the role in his offense right now is just non-existent. He plays Houston this week, but he's got 0 catches on the season, back-to-back weeks. So I don't think you can play him until you see him kind of have an increased role going forward. And then the defense we're looking to sit this week, we're going to have Rams at the Cardinals. I think that Cardinals comeback could potentially spark some life into them. They look dead in the water, but they could be back now. And when their offensive guys are healthy and playing confident, they can be a fun watch. So maybe last week kind of revitalized them and gave them some more energy going forward. I think this game could be a bit of a shootout. Over under is 49.5 in this one, tied for the third highest right now for the week. So anytime there's a lot of points projected in a game, fantasy football defense wise, I would like to stay away. So sit list, we got Rodgers at quarterback, Russell Wilson at quarterback, Etienne at running back, Ezekiel Elliott at running back, Terry McLaurin and Bateman at receiver, Dawson Knox and Cole Kmet at tight end, and Rams defense at the Cardinals this week. That'll do it for our week 3 stardom sit-em show for fantasy football. Like I said, week 1, we killed it with 130 to 69, I believe it was. Last week, 190 to 87. The goal here is to just outscore the sit list every week. I've done it by over 100 last week and over, I believe, 60 the week before. So a rocking start to the year here on fantasy football coverage on Beef Up Front. Make sure to like, subscribe. Like I said, if you got any questions or anything else maybe that I didn't touch on about your lineups, don't be afraid to drop it in the comments below or DM us on Twitter or Instagram at Beef Up Front. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will talk next week.